You're listening to Retail Disrupted, a podcast that explores the latest industry developments and the trends that will shape how we shop in the future. I'm your host, Natalie Berg. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to take a moment to acknowledge Neurodiversity Celebration Week. This is important to me, both as a neurodivergent woman myself, but also as a mom to an autistic child. I kind of accidentally discovered my neurodiversity last year. And I think it's really common if you have a child who is neurodivergent and they get a diagnosis, or even if they don't, if you kind of figure out that they're neurodivergent. Either way, you go down this rabbit hole of all things autism, ADHD, masking, hyperfocus, special interests, and then you have a light bulb moment because you recognize a lot of those traits in yourself. And that's exactly what happened to me. What I always thought were just my quirks, my kind of funny little rules and funny little ways of doing things. Actually, it has a label, and it's neurodiversity. I think especially in girls and women, it can be hard to spot. And I personally can relate to perfectionism. And actually, that was one of the reasons why it took me so long to start this podcast, because it was like, oh, the fear of rejection. So rejection sensitivity dysphoria, for those of you out there who are well-versed in this space, you'll understand that rejection can feel so painful. The commitment of turning up every week, the fact that it might not be as polished as previous work, comparing it to writing a book or writing an article or creating a presentation and then presenting that live on stage, that's very different. And so I think I've always been able to have that control over my work. And then launching a podcast was like, oh, this is so scary. So that I think I can really relate to. And also for me, I mean, the big one for me really is special interests. Again, professionally, I'm pretty obsessed with retail. I've spent the past 20 years writing about retail, researching, getting on stage and talking about retail. I couldn't get on stage and talk about anything else. But retail, yeah, I could do that. Going on TV and radio to talk about retail. I can spend hours, days, weeks, reading through transcripts, writing, I can just go so deep. And I think that alone is a big sign of my neurodiversity. And also I think it's really positive that I've been able to channel it. I've been able to find something professionally that I'm so interested in and passionate about and brings me a lot of joy. And I've been able to channel it in a really positive way. And also the fact that I'm self-employed. I love being my own boss. I can never imagine working for someone again, because again, that's another kind of big sign of neurodiversity. But also my brain is always buzzing. I always have ideas. It does get to a point where I'm like, where is the off button? I just want to switch it off. But I think when you have this, when you have both autism and ADHD coexisting, it is like this internal tug of war. And I also think that's why it got missed all these years, because they sort of, in some ways, balance each other out. The other thing I wanted to just call out is around special interests. So professionally, yes, I'm super obsessed with retail, and this podcast is case in point. But outside of work, I also have special interests. I'm really into gardening. I'm really into weightlifting. And I'm really obsessed with French. I've always been obsessed with French ever since I was a kid. So with gardening, I can tell you how much sun a plant needs. Is it good for wildlife? What does it look like in different seasons? I can tell you its Latin name. Like, most people don't do that. But I enjoy it, and I know that that's the way that my brain's wired. So anyway, I think it's important to celebrate diversity of thought. I know that people can experience neurodiversity differently, and I think that's, again, probably why it's so hard to spot in girls and women. For some people, it can be crippling. It can be disabling. And I've witnessed that firsthand. For others, when channeled in the right way, neurodiversity can be a huge strength. And my guest today has proven exactly that. George Sullivan is the founder of the Sole Supplier, Europe's leading online destination for sneaker and streetwear fans. George is an ADHDer himself. He is super passionate about his own neurodiversity. I am going to include a link in the show notes to one of his YouTube videos where he talks about how our ADHD brains are like Ferraris, but with bicycle brakes. And he includes some tips about how you can hack your brain and get the most from your neurodiversity. First, let me tell you a little bit more about George. George is a 34-year-old founder, born and bred in London. 10 years ago, while he was working in recruitment, he started a platform to help people find shoes. Since then, that online community has grown into an 8-figure global business and a key strategic partner to some of the world's biggest brands like Nike, Adidas, Converse, Puma, and more. George and his team have built a community of over 3 million dedicated streetwear enthusiasts, generated over 1.5 billion impressions, and driven over 250 million pounds in revenue for brands. Let's welcome George to the podcast. George, thank you for being here today. Tell us more about the Sole Supplier and what inspired you to launch it.
So the Sole Supplier I started whilst I was working in recruitment. I got the trainer bug, so every week I would buy shoes with my recruitment commission, but I always had a dream to get out of recruitment, right? And after doing it for a year and a half, I realised I could show other people where I get the shoes that they want. And I knew all of the retailers and all the places, so I started the website. I had that light bulb moment. And then it took off from there. I kept reinvesting to grow the website, built an app. And the Sole Supplier helps people find shoes, and we help brands like Nike and Adidas create demand and hype in the market. Because that classic thing of Nike can say that they're cool, but if someone like the Sole Supplier says that they're cool, it lands better with the consumer. So that's where we sit.
Oh, interesting. I think what's really cool about what you do is, firstly, it's very clear. And you've got a really clearly defined proposition. You know what makes you special. And for any business, not just in retail, for any business, that's really important. Having that purpose, being able to stand out in the market. And, the world is very noisy. And I think finding the thing that you're passionate about and going really deep on that subject is really admirable. So I guess my question to you is this what you set out to do? Or is it something that has just sort of evolved over the years?
I didn't set out to do this. I was working in that recruitment job, and I just so happened to start getting obsessed with shoes. They're very significant in terms of the package that they offer. They're a small offering. There's a lot of history behind certain shoes, and some of them are associated with great people like Michael Jordan. So it's very easy to get attached to the stories and the collectability of them, and that's what really got me. So I never expected me to get obsessed with shoes. And almost like it's quite a funny thing to get obsessed with, because I don't think I've got obsessed with any other collector's items like that, maybe Pokemon cards. But naturally, I am the consumer that we sell to. I was a lot more of it 10 years ago, but now we have amazing, passionate people in the team who are part of that demographic and that audience, right?
Yeah.
They live and breathe.
Who is your main audience then?
Our main audience are people that are, I would say, fashion conscious. They're people that want to look good, but they want to buy from brands that have heart and that tell stories. And that's why a lot of the shoes that we talk about, whether that's the Travis Scott collaboration or a new drop from Cortez, who's run by Clint, or YMC's new trouser launch, they're all backed by founders who are transparent or with good stories behind them. Like when Travis Scott collaborates on the Jordan 1, people that love Travis Scott and love his music, they want to get that Jordan 1, right? So the target audience is people that love that hype and that love that something special and something that tells a story and has heart.
Yeah, that storytelling and authenticity and community, I guess all of those things are really important.
The UK is thriving right now for like independent brands especially. And I speak about Nike as kind of one of the homegrown sportswear brands from the US, but the UK is thriving. There are so many, everyone from About Blank to YMC to Duke and Dexter to Clint's to Cortez. The list truly goes on, and these are UK independent founded brands, and they've got heart, they've got quality, they're more sustainable. This is where it's at right now.
Let's talk about the opposite end of the spectrum, because earlier today we heard a lot about Shein and Temu, and you spoke very candidly about the kind of disposable nature of this end of the market, and you actually said that they have no heart.
Yeah.
So tell us more about this, and also how do you see brands coexisting with these disruptors?
The cost per wear on Temu and Shein is high. So you might wear one of the t-shirts once or twice and the t-shirt will disappear in the wash. That's an exaggeration, isn't it? But the neck will sag, the colour will fade, and the material will not feel anything like when you first bought it, right? So actually the cost per wear is high. Whereas if you buy something that it has better quality, it might be double the price point, and it lasts for 3 or 4 times as long, there's actually more value in that. So what consumers are missing is they're buying initially based on that price, but if they have to buy again in 2 or 3 weeks because it's destroyed through 2 washes, then is it really a good price? And that's what people miss. But when you're younger, you're only focusing on the short term most of the time. As you start to get a bit older, you weigh up the long-term value of things like food. You start to go, if I get organic broccoli or something that's farmed a bit more sustainably, it's going to have more nutrients, which are going to help me look better for the long term. Look and feel better, right?
Yeah.
But only when you get older and maybe you've done a bit better for yourself or you've got a bit more disposable income is that possible.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because earlier today
Yeah.
you made that point because there's a lot of talk about, should we be shopping more sustainably? Should we be spending more? And for some people, it's not a choice. And I think
Exactly.
you made that point, and that is a really good point to just remind ourselves that as nice as it would be to abandon the Sheins and the Temus of the world, for some people, they shop there out of necessity.
Yeah, the whole time there's a wealth gap in the world, which there probably always will be to some extent. That could be the biggest problem to solve. I think people are sometimes always going to shop based on price. And we can't knock those people because they're doing that, because they're doing it in some cases to survive.
Yeah.
In some cases, they're doing it to show up in their friendship circle where they want to look the part like their friends. And I experienced this, right? I actually got into a private school and a charity place. And my parents lived in a 3-bedroom terraced house, and I was going to mansions that were 6, 7, 8 bedrooms with like their kids would get a new BMW at 17 when they drive it into school. So I'm around these kids like that have a lot more money than me, and I felt like I needed to show up. I didn't have the trainers at school, I didn't have the clothes, but some of them did. I didn't have the car. I drove the Fiat Seicento, the in-betweeners car. So it's like I understand how those people feel when social media and their friends may be displaying all of this stuff and they just want to keep up.
Yeah.
And again, that's something that you learn as you get older, right?
Yeah.
That's not what it's all about. But when you're young, it can feel like live or die.
Yeah. That's so interesting. And also to your point about value versus price, they are 2 different things, aren't they? So
Absolutely.
Let's talk about resale. How have you seen resale evolve and what are the driving forces behind it?
My perspective on the resale market is that the resale bubble popped. It's not gone anywhere, but the market growth has slowed down massively. And I believe a big reason for that is because there was a lot of resale businesses that were backed by investment. We've been fully bootstrapped, self-funded. We haven't had investment, but because there was so much investment money in these resale businesses, a lot of that's gone now. For example, StockX had over $500 million of investment. And I think that stopped, the investment stopped flowing in and around maybe 2020. So that's a lot of marketing spend that doesn't go back into the market potentially if they've slowed down their spend, right? And I'm assuming here, but that can cause a big market pop sometimes, like the dot-com boom. The money goes somewhere else. Has the investment money moved to AI? So yeah, it's still there, but prices have dropped and people are not able to afford resale as much as well. So it's a case of like, there's not as much hype and there's not as much money in the market.
Which doesn't bode well then.
Exactly. So it's just slowed right down.
Yeah, and you just mentioned AI. I know this came up earlier today too. And something you said really stuck with me. You said that it should be frowned upon if your staff aren't using AI. And I'm going to ask you to clarify for our listeners, what do you mean by this and how are your teams responding to it?
I knew that would be picked up on in that way.
Come back to bite you.
I said that truly for like the way it sounded, which is like, I'm hugely invested in our team. I had 10 jobs before I started this business, and I came from like the ground up, right? Working in sales, HR, admin, knocking on doors on high streets, trying to sell them marketing. So I know what it's like to try and build your skills. And so we invest in our team with like paying opportunities well. And I want them to be happy. And I also don't mind if someone wants to leave for a better opportunity. I know that's the nature of business. All I can try and do is pay them well and keep them learning and keep them growing, right? And make sure their role's competitive. And to do that, they need to be using AI. Because if there's marketers now in our organisation that aren't, it will be frowned upon when they go to another place and they say, how are you using AI? And they're not. So therefore, it's my responsibility to encourage them to do the right things for themselves and therefore our business. And it's a twofold thing. It's like if they do it, they're going to get better at their role, they're going to be more attractive in the market, and hopefully it's going to help our company perform. It's like a triple threat. So that's almost why I want it to be frowned upon, because the last thing I'll say on this is my dad always said to me, don't miss the internet era. And I listened to him because he was a little bit older and not tech savvy, because he missed the mobile phone era. He said, oh, it's just, it's going to fade. People won't need these phones. They're too big. They won't need mobile phones. And he kicks himself because he was so wrong. And he always looks back on that moment. So it's the same sort of thing. I'm passing on that responsibility for people to not miss a golden era of opportunity. So that's why it should be frowned upon, I guess.
Yeah, no, yeah. I love that. I wasn't trying to call you out on it.
No, I appreciate you asking.
But you're right. It's a leveler, right? It's an enabler. So when we talk about AI, it's often, we often talk about the kind of scary things and where it might go in the future. But actually, there are a lot of positives. And so I love how you frame that. Last question for you, George. How do you see retail evolving? If we look ahead to the next 5 to 10 years, what are you expecting?
I said to somebody that as AI advances, people think we're all going to get more lonely and we're going to be more invested in technology that takes us away from people. I think there'll be a resurgence in people wanting human connection. And it depends how deep the AI goes. I mean, if you're giving your children devices that are iPads and AI enabled from the age of 5, 6, it's very likely it's going to change behaviour for the bad, for good. But if we're educating our children, like I've got a child on the way, right? I'll be educating our child.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'll be educating our child that technology is an assistant to your life and to your real world interactions, but you still need to build the real world skills to be a capable human being. And I think it's our responsibility to do that. And I know people already that are loving human connection more than ever. When they get out and about, they're like, oh, this is great, this in-person event, because we haven't been doing it as much. Or some people that value in-person shopping because they got so fed up of shopping online for 10 years. So it kind of swings back the other way, is what I think will happen.
Yeah.
And the whole time we're normal humans, aka not connected to AI ourselves in our brain, we're not like hybrid humans, I still think we'll value human connection and in-person experiences. And that counts for retail as well, which...
Yeah. Definitely.
Both can coexist.
Yeah. No, that really well said. I fully agree. And I think if you think about the skills required in the future, empathy is right up there and emotional intelligence. These are the things that robots can't do. George, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Thank you for listening to Retail Disrupted. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the podcast, please leave a rating or review or share it with others. It really makes a difference.